We are back. It's been a minute. We took a little bit of a sabbatical. Lots has been going on, but we are finally back. Full swing, ready to get after it. And we have a lot of exciting announcements coming very, very soon. It's going to be a good one. I'm excited. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name's Dr. Andy. And as always, I'm joined by my esteemed, well-groomed colleague, to be honest, sheer model of a man, Dr. Chus. How are you, bro?
Thank you for the compliments. That's how he got me back. No, I'm joking. Yeah, very good, very good. Very excited for the next season in adjusting the game.
Even me, bro. Even me. Anything new on your side?
I did not get married, but I did redo my practice. Anything new on your side?
Yeah, I thought getting married was cheaper than redoing my practice. I was wrong.
Just slightly.
Chose the right one though. Yeah, so small little change. I decided to upgrade from fiance to husband, so that's been real. But other than that, just grinding away, man, doing the same things that we do, spreading the gospel that is Kara.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Got quite a nice topic today. An interesting one. Kind of a, I always want to say under the radar topic. You're always aware of it, but you're not really aware of it. It's always there. It's always involved, but you might not be consciously aware of it.
So, if I'm absolutely honest, this topic was actually largely inspired by an interaction that I actually had end of last year, I believe it was. A good mate of mine, when I was actually at training, we're actually the only two there, and he came up to me and he was like, "Andy, can I borrow you for a sec?" So I was like, "What's up, bud?" And he was like, "How do you stay motivated to train?" And I looked at him and I was like, clearly he was having a bit of a rough morning. And I was like, I didn't really think about it much. And I said, "Bud, I don't." So you can see he kind of looked at me weird. And I was like, dude, motivation is going to go up and down. Discipline is like essentially going to get me to keep showing up. And I learned that a while ago, that discipline was going to fluctuate. I mean, motivation was going to fluctuate, but discipline was going to keep me kind of showing up because I know that I need to put the work in. And he kind of just looked at me and like tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, "Okay, cool. Needed to hear that." And he just went off and we went our separate ways and absolutely smashed the session. But I'll admit, after I had that interaction with him, for the next couple of days and even for the next couple of weeks, I don't really know why, but I'm mildly obsessed over why I said what I did, kind of where it came from. And I started to unpack the concept a little bit of kind of this whole motivation versus discipline. And I found myself going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So before I kind of plunge into all of that, dude, what's your take on this whole discipline versus motivation, that whole concept?
I've kind of broken it down into the simplest way I can is, you have to start with why. You have to be very, very clear. Why am I putting myself through this pain? And on the topic of pain, you're always going to have pain in your life, whether it's a physical pain or the pain of doing something uncomfortable at work that you're not necessarily wanting to do. So you're either going to choose your pain or your pain, going to choose you, I guess. And if you're clear on what the goal is from the get-go, I mean, for us, we'll discuss now on a personal level, on a practitioner level. But at the end of the day, it's if you know exactly what's and why you're doing something for, you'll be willing to suffer for it, and you'll be willing to build the discipline and all that. So that's what it kind of, at its simplest form, it's that clarity before any systems, before any habits, discipline, anything. Like, what is the goal? Like, what's my outcome? Why does this matter to me? And we're humans. We don't necessarily always as logical as we try to be. We do act on emotion. Why do you book the session with the chiropractor? Yeah, you were in pain. It's not because he's a nice guy. You miss him, maybe, but you were in pain, and that's an emotion, and there's fear, associated with that. And if your why is weak, your discipline's going to be fragile.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, to break it down into like simpler terms and how I put it in my head, when I wanted to try and essentially kind of reduce all of the thoughts that I had going through my head, I look at motivation as essentially emotional fuel. So very much based on how I'm feeling, where my mood's at. And let's be honest, emotions can be chaotic little gremlins at the best of times. So it can be very, very up and down. Whereas discipline, I almost view as kind of like a behavioral contract. So very much based within our values and our identity, not based on our emotions and mood. And that kind of lends itself towards a little bit of consistency. So if I were to frame it in a way that made sense to me, I looked at it as motivation gets you to show up when you're feeling good, but discipline gets you to show up when you're not feeling good. And in all honesty, progress only cares about the second one. So I want to go out on a limb and say that we're very much kind of on the same page on how we kind of look at this. And when I took a step back and I was like, all right, cool. But then how does someone necessarily develop a successful pattern of discipline? And for me, I went down this track of being kind of thinking along the lines of, can I find a step-by-step process that someone could necessarily do this? Like, why do I think the way that I do? Because I tend to have, and I think we share this, a bit of that suck it up buttercup mentality. Like for the longest time, my mantra is just be less shit. And it was just kind of the mentality that I have. But I think we deal with a lot of people on a daily basis. We know that doesn't like necessarily resonate with everyone. And my whole question was like, why? Why does that necessarily resonate with everyone? So I went down this whole thing of being like, cool, there has to be certain either principles or pillars or essentially step-by-step processes to how someone lands up developing a successful pattern of discipline. So I went down this whole little journey to try and essentially unpack this for myself. And essentially what I came up with was 4 different principles that I think help someone build up some form of a successful pattern of discipline. And the first one is values. So essentially what is most important to you, your root system, if you will. So that could be family, faith, traits we hold ourselves accountable to, such as just being responsible, being reliable. These values essentially form at our core. So they are kind of what govern our actions. And I almost find a kind of like a natural progression of wanting to find yourself grow and develop these values. And with that growth mindset of working to obtain and embody these values, I feel like it's a lot easier to then start incorporating discipline into doing what needs to be done to essentially achieve and align yourself with these values that are obviously so important to you. And that kind of led me very quickly then into the second principle, which is essentially our identity. So who we are, or more importantly, who we see ourselves as. And I'm a really big believer in that we need to have some form of consistency with how we view ourselves, so our identity. We are who we say we are, because I feel like that adds up over time as a reminder that can almost kind of change the script in our head and self-talk from I want to train to I'm someone who trains. So in other words, you kind of remove that negotiation within your own head. I'm someone who keeps promises. I'm someone who shows up no matter what. And that's just who I am and what I do. It forms part of how we view ourselves. And that led me very quickly then into the third principle, which really kind of hit me hard because I've had issues with this in the past, but it translated well. And I almost kind of find it like being a bit of the differentiator, and that is self-trust. Because this kind of forms the bridge between ideologies meeting actions. Do you do what you say you will? Do you keep those promises to yourself and put into action what you know aligns with your values and who you identify as? And I think that's really important, because if you keep breaking those promises, I think on like a subconscious level, it affects us in a very negative way, because you're not aligning your actions with your values and who you identify as. So for example, if I'm building up to a big competition, or I'm just choosing to take my health a little bit more seriously, so I want to get up and start training in the mornings because I know that I've got family commitments, I've got work commitments, my day's just going to get ahead of me. So I'm like, cool, I'm committing to this. This is something I want to take on. This is something that's very important to me. And the 5 a.m. alarm goes off and I press snooze. And then I feel this sense of guilt throughout the rest of the day because I broke a promise to myself. I said that I was going to get X or Y done, and I didn't. And again, I feel like subconsciously this affects us in a very negative way. This is very important because ultimately I think it builds into a level of confidence that we subconsciously get in our own abilities and who we are. Self-trust, I feel, comes down to you are who you say you are because you live by what you say. Type thing. Put that shit on a t-shirt. So I'll be honest, when I first kind of went through this process, I was like, I'm going to end it at this third pillar, but it didn't make sense to me. Like I feel like there was another principle that I needed to add because, to use a bit of an analogy, I feel like I had drawn like 3/4 of a circle and it just didn't kind of finish up. There was still something that I felt that was missing to just kind of, from my own personal experience, just finish it off. And I can't take full credit for this one because it actually kind of was inspired when I was actually listening to another podcast. And I was listening to the Modern Wisdom podcast by Chris Williamson. And it is a conversation between him and Alex Hormozy, which big fan of both of them. And he said to Alex, we don't rise to the standards that we have when everyone is watching. We fall to the standards that we have when no one is watching. The real work that matters is the work that gets done when no one is around. And that sent me for a mindfuck. There's no other way of saying it. It really kind of just hit me super hard. And that's where the fourth pillar just came straight into me. That fourth principle, I was like, that's it. Standards. So I kind of think of it as the line in the sand, the line that you won't cross. Standards are how we operate on a day-to-day, even when no one is watching. Let's face it, life is going to get busy. It's going to get hard. It's going to get hard to hold yourself accountable day in and day out. We are often not going to have that little cheerleader on our shoulder or that person screaming in the background. It's great when they're there and it's cool to have that motivation, but they're not always going to be there. But the standards that we set for ourselves will keep us on track. I finish what I start. I show up to the best of my abilities, no matter what. Doesn't matter if I'm the only one in the training hall. I'm going to do the reps that are required to be done, and I'm going to do them to the best of my ability, best quality possible. Doesn't matter if no one's there to cheer me on or to make sure that I'm putting in the work. Standards, I feel, kind of remove negotiation from the equation. Think of negotiation as a bit of a terrorist in this situation. We don't negotiate with terrorists. And I feel like negotiation can sometimes kill discipline. But if it almost becomes a set system, the standards you hold yourself to prevent that. So to take a little bit of a step back here, this kind of all then just made a lot of sense in my head and flowed very easily. I feel these four principles underpin how we form a good discipline pattern. Starts with values. What's most important? That naturally progresses into, right, this is how I identify. This is the type of person I am or the type of person I want to be. And that leads me to act a certain way. And when I act that way, that builds that self-trust. But again, life gets busy. It can get hard to uphold those values. So we put in standards, which create that consistency over time. Discipline in what we do, holding us accountable. I think these four principles do a really good job in shifting discipline from a forced behavior to an aligned behavior. And what I mean by that is, and I've experienced this firsthand, a forced behavior, I look at something that's going to crack under pressure. When shit really hits the fan and you get put under the pump, the chances of that falling to pieces is very high. Versus an aligned behavior, it's going to stand strong under pressure. Because why? It's something that resonates with you. It's something that when shit gets really real and you get pushed into that dark place, where you get challenged consistently, you'll stick to it. Again, I've experienced this firsthand through training, through studies, through personal obstacles that I've had to kind of work through. And the more that I've chatted to people about this concept, I think it's been generally agreed that it's a hard process to go through. It's a tough part, I think, of like self-development that requires you to kind of like sit down, work through it. You have to do this alone. You have to kind of ask yourself those hard questions with no dopamine snacks, no social media, no YouTube. Like you got to sit there and work through that shit. But eventually you will find something that resonates with you. When you do, that becomes your why. Just like you mentioned earlier, the second you said that, I was like, that's essentially what these four pillars kind of divert. If you imagine a bit of a diagram and they all kind of then lead towards that, your why. That's been mentioned to me before. Like, Andy, you got to find your why. And I'm not going to lie, like I grasped what they were trying to say, but only recently, especially when I kind of went down this, or trying to really understand this whole process, that I really grasp what it kind of really meant. That's it. That's the engine. That's what pushes it. But it needs to be personal. It needs to be authentic to you. Can't be borrowed from social media, from someone else that you kind of really liked what they said. It has to be yours. And I think when you reach this point, it becomes a little easier. Discipline stops feeling like a punishment. It feels like there's a level of integrity. And again, I think you can agree with me, dude. Because of what we see in practice in the individuals that we work with, humans can tolerate a lot. We can be stupid resilient, especially when it comes to preserving, again, our integrity. I see it all the time. Athletes putting in tremendous work, from crazy training leagues to still trying to find to recover and dialing in diets and all that sort of stuff, versus good parents. It blows my mind on what parents will do to get everything done they need to for the little ones. Limited sleep, absolutely grafting themselves to the bone to make sure that they can provide for the little one. Sometimes I literally refer to them as superhuman, but when you speak to them about it, it's because one of their main core values is they want to be present, they want to be a good parent. And again, because that's one of their core, they will do anything that they can to make sure that that happens. What's your thoughts on this, bro? Sorry, that was a fucking long monologue.
Beautiful. I actually had a few goosebumps there, and I thought there was going to be a tear there. No, it was very very well put. And yeah, just that whole thing of showing up for yourself, and setting, this is my values, this is my standard, this is who I am, and kind of looking yourself in the mirror, making uncomfortable eye contact, and going like, this is a standard, and this is how it's going to be. And again, I think that comes down to, as you said, the why and the clarity. You know exactly who you are, and I'm going to tweak your one quote there. I'm going to change it to, you don't rise to your motivation, you fall to your systems. Because, as you said, motivation is emotional. It's fleeting. It's going to be there for seconds, minutes, hours, days. But then when things get tough, as you said, life gets busy, things get complicated. If there's not that clarity of your values and your standards, and then at the end of the day, you're making the decision to take responsibility for these things. No one's going to do this for you. And I think those realizations, it's just, it almost, it's your ammo, it's your ammunition, and you just need to pull the trigger and go. So very much agree with you on all that. I'll get primal. Let's go primal. Let's get primal, right? So for me, if you break it up, any choice that you make, a decision, whether you decide to snooze the 5 a.m. or you decide to get up and get after it, it's broken down into pain and pleasure. So the pain of getting up in the dark, in the cold, it's wet, it's not fun. And you're getting after it, the cold steel in your hands. You learn to love that eventually, but in the beginning, it's quite uncomfortable. But that's a short-term discomfort. But in the long term, you're growing, as you said, it's that character, that personality growth, of like that character building of, it's another deposit in the bank account of like, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. And that's kind of fills up your motivational tank at the end of the day. That confirms, this is who I am. This is my standard. This is my value. And it also makes it more clear, and it takes away, as you said, that decision fatigue. There's one less thing to worry about. If you put these systems and these habits and discipline, kind of takes away that decision fatigue, and and the negotiation, and it becomes a non-negotiable. Each deposit makes the non-negotiable more solid, where it becomes just autonomous. So you just go. Where if you snoozed, obviously it's the short-term pleasure of, okay, I'm sleeping an extra half an hour. But then, as you said, you wake up later on, and the whole day you can't look yourself in the eyes in the mirror, because the guy in the mirror knows, and that takes away. And as you said in the beginning, it's not pretty. Like you're going to go through phases and stages, whether it's in your personal life, your business, whether it's with your fitness journey, your pain journey. It's going to be trial and error. It's ridiculous to think that you're going to get 100% right from the start. You are going to fail. And once you nail the business side, the training side maybe, dips a bit. And then you get the training side, but then the personal side goes, and it's always going to be a dynamic kind of shift, because we're complicated. Humans are very multidimensional. so yeah, I really, it's making my job so much easier because you had such nice clear pillars right now, and I can just kind of go with that. And on this whole topic of like deposits, basically in your motivational bankers, it needs to be, you need to assign a meaning to something. So, for example, I can speak a bunch of, I think we said what, 15 languages, random phrases in 15 languages, right? But if you had to swear at me in like what language, like in Mandarin, right? Exactly, right? If you had to swear at me in Mandarin, like you can go, you can throw your arms, you can swear at me. I don't understand you. I don't know what you're saying. I have not assigned any meaning to that word. So it doesn't mean anything to me. So that's why I'm saying, like, with motivation, we've got the clarity, we've got the values, we've got the standards, and you've attached a meaning to that. What does that mean to you as a person? And once there's meaning, the motivation is just going to come naturally. So I think that's going to give you that consistency because there's that purpose. And like another silly example is, what are you going to work harder for, to prevent someone from stealing 100,000 rand or trying to gain 100,000 rand? If you already have 100,000 rand, you're gonna, that's a lot of meaning that you're attaching to that. You're gonna work much, much harder to avoid the pain of losing that than trying to risk the pleasure. And that's just how we basically, I guess, wired on a primal level. Insert ad on primal nutrition here. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, sponsors. And then I think all of this kind of boils down to the, as you said, again, the responsibility of the day that you decide to take action and go like, okay, the moment you start putting in systems and going like, you know what, I'm going to put my phone or my alarm clock like 1 meter away from my bed. That's my little system. It forces me to get out of bed and switch it off, close to the shower, close to my shoes, and just put my shoes on. Once you start making these small little decisions, that relationship with yourself, you start taking yourself seriously. The guy in the mirror goes, okay, this guy's serious about this goal. There's the meaning, there's the clarity, there's the values, there's the standards. You know exactly who you are. And making these it almost feels insignificant, moving your phone slightly further away, something silly like that. But it makes another deposit in that motivational bank. And it makes those values and those standards a little bit clear. And then, you also need to be kind to yourself. You need to make it as easy as possible. You need to set yourself up for success and not failure. You can't expect your body and your mind to go like, okay, today I'm waking up at 3 a.m. to train, but tomorrow I'm only training at like 4 p.m. There needs to be some consistency. At least, okay, if you're going to do it like that, then alternate it. And then, no, Mondays, this is the day that I'm doing this. Tuesdays, I even tell some of my athletes, keep your interval days on the same day, keep your long run days on the same day. Everyone knows, general rule of thumb, people are doing long runs on the weekend just because you have more time. But your body knows, your mind knows, everything kind of works towards that, towards like a system that you basically put in place. And that just completely takes out the decision fatigue. It takes out the negotiation factor. And you absolutely just setting yourself up for success. And the system is proving to yourself that you're serious about your goals. And at the end of the day, the motivation, I'm sure we have external motivations, but that is even more fleeting than an emotional internal motivation. So that's my TED talk on my 2 cents on your 2 cents. So it's 4 cents now. Almost soon.
Dude, you made two really, you made phenomenal points, but two that really stuck out to me was one, you mentioned it in terms of like essentially putting these systems in place. And this is me on a personal level. And I don't know if you kind of feel the same way, but very early on, this was like probably early varsity days, when essentially I started to have these values that I found that I really wanted to commit to. I started to find myself very pressed for time to obviously get all of that in. So I became a very routine driven or system driven person. And because of that, people would constantly be like, geez, Andy, like you've got like almost your hours to down minutes to everything kind of planned out. I was like, unfortunately, if I want to get done what I need to get done, whether that be from training to studies to sometimes it can be social interactions, you name it. I found it very chaotic to just kind of haphazard see what would happen through the days. And that works for some people. I get it. Haphazard see what happens through the week. I needed that structure in place. So talking about systems or standards, whatever you want to phrase it. And in order for me to essentially get everything done that I wanted to, and to allocate the time towards everything that I felt was most important to me, I needed to put certain systems and routine into place. And eventually that routine came second nature. Like you said, it's another way of thinking of removing negotiation from the factor, because it was just something that I did. It was like, cool, Monday I know I'm doing X, Y, Z. Tuesday I'm doing X, Y, Z. And it would just consistently roll like that. And before I know it, it's just what I do without thinking. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 months, 5 months. And essentially you can look back and be like, holy crap, I just blinked. And it became habit. It's just what I do. And essentially, if you've planned that out properly, in my opinion, to devote the time that you feel is necessary towards whatever necessarily resonates with you the most, that's how small wins translate into massive gains over time. And I don't want to butcher this quote, so I'm going to try my best not to. But I heard Steve Bartlett from his podcast. He mentioned, like, he framed it in a way that it was a while ago that stuck with me. And it kind of essentially takes what we're saying and puts it in such a cool analogy, where he essentially looked at the one most precious asset that we have is time. And when we're talking about doing essentially what we're doing, where you've now got to choose very carefully to allocate your time towards what you feel resonates with you the most, where your values, etc., lie, because we only have a certain amount of time. So he equated it to essentially looking at his life as a roulette table, where he gets 24 hours in a day, so 24 chips. And if you sleep 8 hours, that's 8 chips gone, you've got 16 chips left. And depending on where your values and goals, etc., whatever it is that you necessarily want to be achieving, you're going to have to allocate that 1 chip is 1 hour. And you need to pick, you only have 16 left. You can't do everything. If you start spreading it all too thin, you're also now going to kind of become very, very scattered, and you can only expect a certain amount of results out of that. So if I'm going to be like, I'm doubling down on this fitness thing, that's 2 chips. Roulette table spins, I get my returns. And essentially that's how it adds up over time. I want to be pushing hard in practice. I want to be spending X amount of time with family, friends, etc. You only have allocated amounts of chips. And again, sitting down and having those conversations with yourself and turning around and being like, right, I can't sometimes get this all done. And you mentioned kind of going through seasons where one thing might be a little bit more important than the other. I think it's important for us to consistently take that step back and be like, right, what am I focusing on right now? Where am I taking those remaining chips that I have, and where am I placing them to get the most returns that I want for currently what's most important to me? So taking essentially what we've discussed now, and given obviously what we do, okay, to not turn this podcast into 3 or 4 hours, because I feel like we could both talk on this quite a bit, taking a dynamic of a relationship that I think we're quite familiar with on both ends. So let's look at something like a practitioner and patient relationship. And we'll visit both sides in this because I know that we've been on both sides. How do you think that this discussion could apply to a practitioner directly?
I'm going to just do exactly the same thing. Like, why are you doing this? Yes, obviously you need to earn a living and feed yourself so that you can have gains and go train. Or, whatever it is, financial goals you have in a third world country, that's obviously going to be very high up your priority list. But if you take it back even further, why did you get into this? Why did you get into healthcare in the beginning? And I find a lot of days when you're burning the candles on 4 ends, not 2 ends. The candle is mutated into something nasty, and we've all been there. We're just really just questioning your life decisions, like, what am I doing? And if you just kind of take a moment, she's like, why am I doing this? And I find myself, asking this question to myself at least 2 to 3 times a week. And it's not me complaining. It's just me reminding myself, like, this is, you need to remember why you're doing this. And again, that motivation, that value, and that standard. And the patient maybe comes in and you kind of you're exhausted, you're tired. It's the 20th one for the day or the 10th one for the day. And, you almost kind of, that little inside voice is starting to negotiate. You're like, yeah, just switch off. Just, like, yeah. But then you remember, like, why are you doing this? And you go like, I want to be the best practitioner for this patient. I want this patient to walk on a cloud out when they walk out of here. Not necessarily, pain free. Obviously, that would be ideal, but they need to kind of walk out of here and go like, wow, like the value that this person has added in the minutes that I've met him, or her, in whatever case, should absolutely be overwhelming. And that's a big one for me personally as a practitioner. I wanna wow you, not razzle dazzle you, but like I want you to walk out of here and be like, listen, I've been in pain for days, for months, for weeks, for years, but I'm cautiously optimistic at the lowest level of motivation. So I would bring it back to that. And then there's obviously a lot of professional goals that you have as a practitioner. I want to be the best in my area. I want to be the best in my city. I want to be the best in my country. I want to be the best for my patients. That's all motivation. But the OG motivation is why did you get into healthcare? No one else wanted me, so I kind of just ended up here. I'm joking. Am I? Actually, in retrospect, did have to fight quite a bit to get into Cairo. We'll go into detail on that. Not academically, I promise. I was all good over there. But again, when that little obstacle came up, I had to kind of rewind and like, why do you want to go here? And I kind of had a list or a criteria of 5 things that my job has to have. That was like my motivation to get into, to become a practitioner. And that's the original one. And now on the day-to-day basis, it's sometimes it's a silly little goal. Like, okay, I've got 10 today. Let's see if today's 10 goes better than yesterday's 10, because yesterday's 10, I felt like number 4 and number 7, I kind of could have done better. I didn't think of this or that. And you just kind of try and stay clear. And as a practitioner, you set your standards and your values. This is who I am. This is how I operate. I don't do 5-minute appointments. I don't do 2-hour appointments, whatever you want to do. And that's the kind of the parameters you set for yourself. And you keep to that.
Yeah, 100%. I think you already touched on massively, which I mean is the big driving factor. Let's not beat around it. That is the root. When it obviously comes down to the why and why we got into this profession and why we went to healthcare in the first place. And I think it comes down to where we're at now. What type of practitioner you want to be, as you mentioned. What is the standard of care that you want to deliver? Having that professional discipline to show up for your patients, regardless of how you feel, if you're tired, it builds that patient trust that I think's irreplaceable. That patient has that mindset when they walk into your office of, it doesn't matter if I'm his first patient for the day, his last patient for the day. Doesn't matter what I walk in, you will get me across the line, one way or another. That may look like treatment, advice, rehabilitative work, referrals to another practitioner. You land up building that reputation of going above and beyond to deliver the best care possible. And I think that's ridiculously important because it keeps your patient's confidence within you as a practitioner. And I think it's very important to keep your patient's best interest at heart at all times, regardless of your emotions. Sometimes learning to subordinate your ego is a big thing. I needed to learn that in the beginning, to make sure that you always make the best call for your patients. An integral part of my identity is being a practitioner who will go above and beyond to deliver the best care possible. And if I have motivation to help me do that, great. I tend to think of myself as a fairly motivated practitioner when people walk in. But life lesson I've learned pretty quickly on, especially when things start to get really, really busy, you're not going to be like that 24/7. And sure, I'll have standards that kind of hold me up to a certain regard that I want to obviously come across to every single patient. But when you start to get incredibly busy and you're having really extensive long weeks, you are human at the end of the day. But one thing I will not move on is I learned very, very quickly, patients don't need me to be motivated. They need me to be reliable, period. I need to make sure that I'm showing up to make sure that I can get them across the line. Doesn't matter if I'm motivated, I need to be reliable.
And then how you stay reliable is like you touched on the previous, is you set the value, you set the standard, you set your systems. You have like, you really have to break it down. You go, my history taking, my assessment, my treatments, my retest, my reassessment, my, follow through. That's your system. That is like, this is who I am. I identify as this practitioner, you know, a good practitioner, and you upheld that standard.
Yeah. Having those systems in place to fall back to, again, go back to when you were speaking about the routine, change routine in terms of from a daily to day basis to week, flip it in terms of systems that you have within practice. So it doesn't matter if I'm incredibly tired, I can sometimes barely think, you fall straight into those systems. And again, this is what we do. So it becomes second nature. So you can follow that step-by-step process to make sure that when that patient leaves the practice, you can be like, cool, might have been the 20th patient of the day, as you say, but I clocked it. Cool. I'm happy with that. Tomorrow's another day. We get after it again. So on the flip side of this relationship, let's put ourselves on the other side of the desk. So keeping with this theme, how do you think this whole concept would apply to a patient going through the healing process, rehab, injury, that sort of stuff? I think it's pretty obvious to say that having a practitioner who's able to guide you and set that tone as you go through goes a long way. I feel like that's a given. But from a patient perspective, what's your thoughts?
Okay, so again, if you start with why the patient is there, most of the time we're dealing with a pain issue or a performance issue. So that would be the big motivation, to kind of start and say, listen, I'm in pain. My goal would be, I would like to not be in pain. Or listen, I am a runner. I have shin splints. I cannot perform. I would like to perform. So that's kind of, again, the essence of the booking, why the patient is in your rooms today. And I think for a patient, there's a natural kind of progression from dependence to interdependence to independence. So the patient kind of rocks up and says, just drops on the bed and says, fix me. That's very much depending on me or you. And then obviously, as you said, we identify as good practitioners, and a good practitioner is going to guide you and kind of try and shift you to interdependence as quick as possible. So that looks something more like, and again, this is still linked to the motivation, in the interdependence phase. It's going to look like, Tristan, Andy, guide me, show me what to do, and I, the patient, will do the work, right? If we can get the motivation level there, and then from there we go to, listen, systems that Tristan and Andy have implemented, that they have shown us the standard of treatment, standard of how I should be treating my body and how I should be recovering, how I should be doing my rehab, how I should be approaching the pain or the performance issue. Those systems will then make you as a patient independent, where you work the system. And if for whatever reason the system doesn't work, you go back into the interdependence and go, Tristan, Andy, I'm struggling a little bit here. My motivation is lacking. Pain's a problem. Performance is a problem. And then we step in. But again, from the start, clarity. Why am I here? What are my expectations? I think is a big one that we need to clarify with patients. A lot of the times I ask them, they'll come in here with a TikTok video, personal, let's call it a favorite, and they go, can you do this? And I have to fight myself to just go and say, of course I can, but not on you. Or only if I want a lawsuit is also one of my my good responses, my regular responses. And I ask the patient, I bring them back to motivation. I go like, what's the motivation? What's the goal here? Do you want to get clicked? Do you want to record this? You want a TikTok video, or do you want to feel better? Or do you want to perform better? And as soon as you reframe that and you set their standard, you remind them of the values. Why are they here? And the values also as you as a practitioner. And a lot of the times you can almost, sometimes we need to step it up and meet the patient at their level. And sometimes we need the patient to step it up and kind of meet us at a clinical level. I mean, I had someone today that asked for a specific kind of adjustment or specific type of chiropractic philosophy. And I said, we don't treat philosophy, we treat whatever the problem is. Like, the motivation shouldn't be, oh, I went to this type or that type of chiro. The motivation should be, I'm in pain, or I have a performance issue, fix this by any and all means possible. And sometimes that's going to mean, listen, like Tristan and Andy's not the guy for you. we need to send you to the physio, we need to send you to the ortho, we need to send you to the GP or the specialist or whoever. But as soon as that standard is a matchup, like the patient's expectation and what we are delivering kind of matches up, I think that is where the long-term motivation for the patient to kind of stay in your patient base will be. So yes, we're obviously trying to get you better, get you out of here. But with the next injury or the next performance issue, that kind of solidifies the motivational base of this is why I go to this person.
Yeah. Did you do a really good job of essentially covering that, that initial walk in, setting that tone, where to kind of carrying that tone forward, then through obviously the whole process. And it's so true, bring us back down to essentially that basic, discussing why you're there in the first place. Speaking just from a personal perspective, so being purely on the other side, especially if you're a patient who unfortunately walks in with an injury that isn't going to be a 1-2 session type of thing that's going to be done. It's going to take some time. It's going to take quite a bit of effort from your side, and possibly it's going to be quite like multifaceted. So it's not just going to be direct treatments. It's probably going to be rehabilitative work involved, etc. There's going to be a lot that's going to be going into getting you across the line. And I think those ones get quite difficult because you almost kind of will fluctuate. There will be times it'll be going well. There will be times you might hit a little bit of bumps in the road. And going back down it, I'm pretty sure you guys can pick up that we keep going to the same concepts, just applying them to essentially different situations. That's because it's exactly that. Healing isn't built on motivation. It's built on consistency. You don't rehab because you feel like it. Well, unless you're just and you just love biomechanics and you're weird that way. You rehab because you decided your body is worth looking after. It aligns with what your values were when you walked into that practitioner. I want to get back to training. I want to get back up under that barbell. I want to get back to track because I miss the peeps that I run with, and that's a big part of my life. I want to be able to go and run outside and play ball with my kids again, because this injury currently stopped me from doing that, because that stopped me from being a very present parent. I want to be able to pick up my grand one a couple of times, and it's broken me a little bit, where someone might have a shoulder injury or something like that, and they're a granddad, and they're like, dude, I can't pick up my grandkids. This is getting real. And I'm like, oh, okay. Everyone got me right here, right here. And I'll have these conversations with patients, especially if it is something that is going to take a little bit of time. Recovery rewards standards, not perfect days. You're going to miss a session here and there. Life happens. You get it. It's okay. Whether that be a missed session of rehab, missed session of treatment, it's right. But don't fall into that trap of then quitting the process because you feel like you've kind of been derailed. That's where people lose it. Consistently remember why you started this whole process, why you went on this journey. Remember, you are worth it. Pursuing this health and getting yourself back up on track is why you started. You don't need to be inspired to heal, contrary to probably. You just need to be reliable. You just need to consistently keep showing up for yourself. Quite frankly, your tissue doesn't care about your mood. That's not how it works. It cares about load, frequency, and time. If you're going to be having someone essentially guiding you through load, if you're a runner, that might be having to change your volume that you're essentially putting out through a week on a daily basis. If you're a lifter, that might be you're not allowed to go with certain percentages. You need to have the discipline to know that you can't, sometimes even when you're feeling really good, you need to hold yourself back. You need to trust the process. Frequency, understanding that there's going to be a certain amount of sessions that you might necessarily require, depending on the case, with someone like Tristan and myself, or frequency of rehab sessions or getting certain sessions done to activate certain things, whatever it necessarily might be, certain times a week, certain times a day. And the most probably neglected out of this is time. Guys, it takes time for tissue to heal. It takes time for these injuries to heal, and different tissues in the body heal at different rates. And even if you could be absolutely smashing the ball out of the park, doing everything, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, there's only so fast that tissue can heal, and it's going to take time. And you need to stick to the process and understand why you started this in the first place. And one big thing that I've made mistakes in the past when I was quite a bit younger, going through a process like this, we've mentioned again, consistency, but don't forget that small, boring sessions done consistently will always beat heroic efforts done really. Sexy effort is overrated. That's just for Instagram. Okay. Repetition wins every single time. I'm sore. It's boring. doesn't matter. Because you know, in order for you to get to where you're working towards, you need to put in that work. You need to show up, again, going back down to the values, for yourself. I am worth it. Don't forget that when you start a process of that, because you will. You'll sometimes, especially when they walk in, can have a conversation with someone like Tristan and myself, you're going to be motivated. You're like, cool, let's get it. Let's get after it. Hell yeah. Put that David Goggins shit on. Then 2 or 3 weeks down the line, you're like, okay, this is getting a bit hectic. I'm getting really tired of doing clamps and I'm really missing lifting. I'm really missing running. It's okay. Remember where you started, even if it's incremental gains. Trust the process. Back it. If we need to pivot, we need to shift, leave that to the practitioner. Obviously, keep that communication line always open, but that's what they're there for, to guide you. You just need to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to make sure that you're ticking all the boxes and doing everything in your power to make sure that you're showing up for yourself.
Power to the people. Power to the people. That was very motivational, actually. Which I was, when you were going, I was like, I'm ready to go storm the castle now. But I think that's quite a nice way to kind of almost wrap it up. On that note, I think we've really tried to drive home the values, the standards, the clarity, understanding pain versus pleasure, and implementing the systems. And once you're implementing the systems and taking the responsibility of booking the session, going on YouTube or whatever it is, whatever your way is of dealing with the pain or the forms as a patient. But it's not going to be linear. The motivation is going to come and go. But if you've got these basics, all your basic ducks in a row, the consistency and the boring stuff will pay the bills at the end of the day.
I think sometimes people just need to understand that it's sometimes not glorified and it's not very sexy. And sometimes I think I've had discussions like this recently with patients where they will, if I heard that saying, comparison is a thief of joy. It irritates me how sometimes they'll see certain journeys, etc., on Instagram, socials, etc., and they'll consistently compare themselves to that. Someone else might have suffered an injury very, very similar to them, time frame, etc., and they'll kind of also consistently keep comparing themselves. And again, I think people need to understand that this is very much an individual journey. There are so many different factors that come down to this sort of stuff. And you need to, and this is expanding on everything, not just in terms of like the healing process, but you need to come down to your values. What I said in the beginning, that Tristan has alluded to multiple times, it's going to come down to what resonates with you. You can't pick that up from something that you've seen on socials, something that you've heard from someone else. It needs to be something that's authentic and personal to you. That's what drives you. It's yours, no one else's. Yes, we may share common goals or common values and that sort of stuff, but it's something that you need to find out that seriously resonates with you. Motivation might start the journey, but the life that you build, the person you become, and the body you live in will always be shaped by the standards you keep and you don't feel like showing up. And it's proven itself time and time again. I think let's leave it at that, bro.
That was very good. I was trying to keep the tears away. It was very good.
Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. As always, it's been a good one. It's good to kick the year off on this one. Please remember to like and subscribe. And we didn't actually mention in the beginning, but one of the important announcements is that we are now going to be available on YouTube, which is very exciting. So if those of you who don't know what we look like, you'll be able to finally see what the hell we look at and put the faces to the voices and the voices to the faces. And yeah, keep a lookout. There's going to be some really cool things happening very, very, very soon. And we're really looking forward to hitting this out of the park.
Cheers. Have a good one.